I can't do this. I'm sorry, I just can't.
The folder trembles in my hands. The edges have gone soft from 9 days of carrying. 9 days of folding and unfolding the results I already know by heart. The paper should weigh nothing. It weighs everything. I press it against my chest like armor, like it can protect me from what I'm about to do. I'm standing at the back of a converted warehouse. Exposed brick walls rise toward a ceiling strung with Edison bulbs that hang from copper pipes. Wooden chairs scrape against polished concrete as guests shift to watch the processional. The music is something classical I don't recognize. Strings and hope and the rustle of fabric as 200 people turn toward the aisle. And there she is. Ife walks toward the altar in a simple dress that catches the afternoon light in ways only expensive fabric does. Small white flowers are pinned into her hair, delicate blooms scattered through the careful style she must have spent hours on. She's smiling, nervous joy barely contained. Her hands wrap around a bouquet held at waist level, knuckles tightening with each step. She looks like our father. The same straight nose, the same way she holds her shoulders, pulled back, chin slightly lifted. I've seen that expression my entire childhood. The same nervous joy he'd get before something important. My sister. The word still doesn't fit in my mouth. 20 steps from the altar. 20 steps from marrying the man waiting at the front of the room. Derek stands with his hands clasping and unclasping at his sides. I can see my family in his jaw. That same stubborn set I've seen in old photographs of my grandfather. My cousin. They're first cousins. And neither of them knows. 15 steps left. I press the folder tighter against my chest. Someone coughs. A child whispers too loudly and gets shushed. The music swells. And Ife's smile widens as she looks at Derek. 10 steps. I could still leave. Slip out the back door while everyone watches her walk. Let them have this moment. Let them have their happiness. Let them build a life together without ever knowing the truth hiding in their blood. 5 steps. But then what? They have children. Medical issues arise. Someone else sends in a DNA test years from now. And she learns. She learns she married her first cousin. She learns her children carry genetic risks no one warned her about. And she learns I knew. She learns I stood in this room and said nothing. Her foot lifts for the next step. And she laughs. Something small. Maybe Derek winked at her. Maybe she's just overwhelmed with joy. The sound hits me like a fist to the sternum. She laughs like our father. The same sudden burst. The same hand coming up to cover her mouth. I've seen my father make that gesture 1,000 times over 31 years. At dinner tables and birthday parties and quiet evenings watching television. Now, I move before I can stop myself. 1 foot forward, then another. The word comes out quieter than I intended. Stop, barely audible. But Ife freezes, 1 foot still raised for the next step. Bouquet clutched at her waist. The small white flowers tremble in her hair. Everyone turns. 200 strangers staring at the man with the folder. The man who just shattered the most important moment of her life with a single word. Derek's expression shifts from joy to confusion. His mother stands halfway. A child starts crying somewhere in the middle rows. But I'm only looking at her. My sister. The woman who forgave a father she barely knew.
Some secrets die with the people who kept them. Others find a way to survive. They pass from father to son like heirlooms nobody asked for, like debts nobody agreed to pay. Cormac Brennan stands at the back of that warehouse with 9 days of weight pressed against his chest. 9 days of knowing what his father did. 9 days of carrying the only truth that can save his sister, or destroy her. That's the particular cruelty of inherited secrets. The man who created this mess is already in the ground. Gerald Brennan doesn't have to answer for it, doesn't have to watch the fallout, doesn't have to see his daughter's face when she learns the man she loves shares her blood. He gets to be remembered as the good father, the devoted husband, the man everyone mourned at a well-attended funeral. And his son gets to be the villain. Speaking destroys the wedding. Staying silent enables something neither of them will see coming until it's too late. There is no good choice here. There is only the least terrible one. This is Cormac's confession. A story about what happens when the dead leave their sins to the living. And the living have to decide whether truth or mercy matters more. If you believe the truth matters, even when it costs everything. Please subscribe. These stories need witnesses. Cormac, take us back to the beginning. What was in that folder? And how did you find it?
9 days earlier. That's where this really started. Before I stood in that warehouse, before I knew I had a sister, before I understood what my father had done, I opened a different envelope. My apartment was the same disaster it always was. Coffee mugs accumulating on every flat surface. 4 on the nightstand, 2 on the bathroom counter. A ceiling fan rattled overhead. The same rattle I'd been meaning to fix for 4 years, but never got around to. The breakfast bar had become a graveyard for mail I didn't want to open. Bills. Junk. A manila envelope from a genetic testing company I'd forgotten existed. I'd sent the sample months ago. Some work wellness initiative offered discounts, and I figured why not? Health markers. Ancestry percentages. The kind of thing you do when you're 31 and single, and looking for any excuse to learn something interesting about yourself. The envelope sat on my counter for 6 days before I opened it. 6 days of eating leftover takeout straight from the container. 6 days of stepping around it on my way to the coffee maker. 6 days of telling myself I wasn't ready to find out whatever waited inside. On day 7, I finally tore it open. I sat at the breakfast bar with cold food in my hand, scrolling through pages of information I didn't really understand. Genetic markers for this. Elevated risk factors for that. Nothing urgent. Nothing surprising. Then I got to the relative matching section. The forks stopped halfway to my mouth. One name appeared under close family match. A designation I'd never expected to see. Half-sibling. Probability. 99.7%. Ife Adeyemi. I stared at the thumbnail photo attached to the profile. A woman with high cheekbones. Hair pulled back from her face. A hopeful smile. The kind you give when you don't know who's going to see the picture, but you want them to like you anyway. My half-sister. The words didn't fit in my mouth. I'm an only child. Have been for 31 years. My father never mentioned another child. My mother never hinted at secrets. I grew up in a house where the 3 of us ate dinner together every night. Where my father coached my little league team. Where nothing suggested he had a whole other family somewhere else. Except apparently, I wasn't an only child. I had a sister. My half-sister. I stared at her face for 3 hours. The thumbnail was small, maybe an inch across on my laptop screen. But I couldn't stop looking. Ife Adeyemi, high cheekbones that caught the light. Hair pulled back from her face in a careful style. She was smiling, that hopeful smile people give when they don't know who'll see the photo. But they want to be liked anyway. My half-sister. I kept saying it in my head. Kept trying to make the words fit. The cursor hovered over connect with relative. 1 click. That's all it would take to start a conversation that would change both our lives. That's probably what she expected when she uploaded her DNA. Hoping to find the father who never stayed. Hoping for answers. Hoping for family. Instead, I closed the laptop. I finished the cold takeout straight from the container. Scraped the last of the sauce with a fork I'd been using for 3 days. Stood at the sink washing that fork by hand. 5 minutes of scrubbing something that could have gone in the dishwasher with everything else. I told myself I'd figure it out tomorrow. Tomorrow became the next day. The next day became 3. 3 days of avoiding my computer like it contained a bomb. 3 days of pretending I hadn't seen her face. Hadn't read those words. Hadn't learned that my father had kept an entire human being secret from me for 31 years. I called in sick to work. Couldn't focus on spreadsheets when my entire understanding of my family had cracked down the middle. My mother was still alive, living in Arizona with her second husband. I thought about calling her, asking if she knew, but what would I say? The conversation felt impossible, so I didn't have it. On day 4, I remembered the storage unit. My father had rented it decades ago. A 10 by 10 concrete box across town, where he kept things he didn't want cluttering the house. Tax records going back 40 years, furniture from his parents' estate, the debris of a life lived longer than expected and packed away instead of processed. When he died 2 years ago, the stroke taking him suddenly on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd inherited everything, the house I sold, the car I donated, but the storage unit. I couldn't face it. 2 years of paying $47 a month to avoid opening that door. 2 years of getting statements in the mail and tossing them in a drawer without looking. 2 years of telling myself I wasn't ready to sort through his belongings, to touch his things, to face whatever version of my father existed in those boxes. I wasn't avoiding grief. I was avoiding discovery. Some part of me had always sensed there were things I didn't want to find. But I had a sister now, and suddenly, I needed answers he couldn't give me anymore. The storage facility sat at the edge of an industrial park, one of those places people forget exists until they need it. I pulled into the parking lot at 9 p.m., the kind of hour when you don't want witnesses to whatever you're about to uncover. The hallway stretched long and narrow. Lights buzzed overhead. My footsteps echoed off concrete floors as I counted unit numbers. Unit 247, my father's secrets. The key felt too light in my palm, small and brass and unremarkable, like it couldn't possibly unlock anything important. I'd carried it on my keychain for 2 years without ever using it, without ever wanting to. The door rolled up with a grinding protest, metal scraping against metal. Dust exploded into the light, swirling like tiny ghosts, disturbed from decades of rest. The smell hit me immediately. Old newspaper, cardboard, going soft with age. The scent of time passing in an enclosed space with no windows and no air. My father's boxes lined the walls in neat stacks. Tax records from the 80s, meticulously labeled in his angular handwriting. Old photo albums I'd never seen. A broken lamp he'd apparently meant to fix. A set of golf clubs he never used. The random accumulation of a man who couldn't throw anything away, who held on to everything just in case. I started with the tax records. Nothing unusual. Then the photo albums. Mostly duplicates of pictures I'd seen at home. Then boxes with no labels at all, crammed with receipts and instruction manuals and birthday cards I'd given him when I was 7. Hours passed. My legs went numb from sitting on cold concrete. My back ached from hunching over cardboard boxes. My eyes burned from the dust and the growing certainty that I was looking for something I wouldn't want to find. 3 hours in, that's when I found the letters. They were buried in a box marked Kitchen Miscellaneous, hidden beneath old dish towels and a set of measuring cups still in their original packaging. A stack of envelopes held together with a rubber band so old it crumbled at my touch, disintegrating into brown fragments that scattered across my lap like dead skin. The first envelope was addressed to my father at a P.O. box I'd never known existed. The handwriting was feminine, careful, the kind of penmanship they used to teach in schools before everyone started typing. I pulled out the letter. Yellowed paper, edges soft from age, creases worn from being read and refolded dozens of times. The date at the top stopped my breath. 29 years ago, when I was 2 years old, when my parents were still married, when my father was coaching my little league team and eating dinner with us every night and being the man I thought I knew. I read the first line. She said her first word today. Dada. I know you can't be here, but I thought you should know. She's got your eyes. The letter was signed with a name I didn't recognize. A woman writing to my father about their daughter, about the word she'd learned to say for a man who was never there to hear it. I read the next letter. And the next. And the next. 29 years of correspondence. Birthday updates. School photos tucked between pages. A little girl becoming a teenager becoming a woman. Report cards with teacher comments. The careful documentation of a life lived parallel to mine. A daughter he'd watched grow up from a distance while sitting across from me at our breakfast table. He'd sent money. I found the receipts tucked between the letters. Checks written from an account I'd never known existed. A second financial life hidden from my mother and from me. Tuition payments. Medical bills. The quiet financial support of a man who couldn't be present, but couldn't walk away either. He'd paid for her college education, covered her mother's medical bills when she got sick, wrote checks every month for 18 years, then every few months for the decade after, and in 31 years of being his son, of believing I was his only child, of thinking I knew who he was. He never told me she existed. My father didn't have an affair. He had a second family. And he took that secret straight to his grave. I read every letter that night, sat on that cold concrete floor until my legs went completely numb, until the lights started giving me a headache that pulsed behind my eyes. But I couldn't stop. Each envelope was a year of my father's secret life, a year of the daughter he'd hidden from everyone. Her name was Ada or Ah. I learned it in the third letter, the woman who'd written all of them, the woman my father had loved, or at least couldn't let go of. The handwriting changed across the decades. Early letters were hopeful, looping cursive full of exclamation points and underlined words. By the 10th year, the writing had grown smaller, tighter, resigned. She stopped asking him to leave my mother around letter 15. Started asking him to just be honest around letter 20. By letter 30, she'd stopped asking for anything at all. The pattern emerged slowly. My father visited in secret, always briefly, always with money. He'd fly in for a weekend and tell my mother he was at a conference. He'd drive 3 hours and claim he was visiting college friends. Small lies stacked on top of each other until they became the foundation of 2 separate lives. The affair started before I was born, before my parents were even married. He met Ada or Ah in graduate school, fell in love, then panicked when she got pregnant, because he'd already proposed to my mother, already sent the invitations, already made promises he didn't know how to break. So he kept both, married my mother, had me, built the life everyone could see, and 300 miles away, he had another daughter growing up without him, a daughter he sent money to, visited when he could, loved from a distance that must have felt like drowning. The last letter in the stack was different from the others. Hospital stationery. The paper thinner, cheaper, the handwriting shakier than before. Smaller letters, less pressure on the pen. Like she didn't have the strength to press down anymore. I almost didn't want to read it. But I had to know. Gerald, she wrote, I'm dying. The doctors say I have 3 months, maybe 4. By the time you read this, I'll probably already be gone. My throat tightened. I kept reading. I told her everything. Ife knows about you now. She knows about the money, about why you never stayed, about all of it. I couldn't leave this world with her still wondering who her father was. She forgave you before I could finish explaining. That's who she is, Gerald. Brighter than both of us combined. I had to stop. Had to breathe. The woman I'd never met. The sister I'd just discovered. She already knew about our father. Had already forgiven him for decades of absence. The letter continued. She's met someone. A good man named Derek. It's serious, Gerald. I see the way he looks at her. I think he's the one. He loves her the way you once loved me. I'm asking you for one thing. After I'm gone, find a way to be part of her life, openly. No more secrets, no more P.O. boxes and weekend visits, and pretending you don't have another family. She deserves a father, Gerald, even if it's just for whatever years you have left. I looked at the date on the letter. 3 months before my father's stroke. 3 months before he collapsed in his kitchen and died before the ambulance arrived. He'd been planning to do it, to finally tell the truth, to reach out to Ife and be the father he'd never been. The letter was his permission slip, the dying wish of the woman he'd loved in secret for 3 decades. But he never got the chance. And now, I was the only one who knew. I drove home at 2 a.m, couldn't sleep, sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, searching for the sister I'd never met. Her social media wasn't hard to find. Ife Adeyemi, 29 years old, graphic designer, living less than 4 miles from my apartment. 4 miles. We'd probably passed each other on the street, stood in line at the same coffee shops, existed in the same city without ever knowing we shared blood. Her profile was full of recent engagement photos. Ife and a man named Derek, him with kind eyes and a crooked smile. Her laughing at something he'd said. They looked happy, genuinely disgustingly happy. The wedding was in 2 weeks. I almost closed the laptop, almost decided to delete the DNA results and forget I'd ever seen her name. Let her have her happiness. Let her marry this man who made her laugh. Let my father's secrets stay buried with him. But something made me keep looking. I don't know why. Curiosity, the same compulsion that had driven me to the storage unit in the first place. The DNA testing site had a feature I'd ignored until now. Shared relatives, a way to see if other family members had submitted samples, a way to map out your genetic connections to everyone else in the database. I went back to my results, scrolled past Faye's profile, looked at the other matches, and that's when I saw it. Derek had submitted his own sample 3 months ago. The site had automatically mapped our genetic relationship, not to my father directly. My father was dead, his DNA never submitted. But to me, the site showed how Derek connected to me through shared genetic markers. First cousin. I stared at the screen. Read the relationship prediction again. Read it a third time. First cousin. It didn't make sense. My father was an only child, or so I thought. But then the memory hit me. A vague recollection of my father mentioning a brother in Ohio he never spoke to. An estrangement so deep he acted like the man didn't exist. Derek was that brother's son. My cousin, which meant my stomach lurched. I barely made it to the bathroom before I threw up, knelt on cold tile with my forehead pressed against porcelain, and tried to breathe through what I'd just understood. First cousin. Derek was my cousin, which made him Faye's first cousin too, and neither of them knew. I checked the settings frantically. Why hadn't they seen each other? It was right there. Then I saw it. Derek had disabled relative matching on his profile. He must have only wanted the health reports. And Faye? Her profile showed her last active date was 2 years ago, right after her mother died. She must have uploaded the sample hoping to find our father. And when he never appeared, she stopped looking. They were flying blind. The body knows before the mind accepts. That's what the nausea is. The physical self rejecting a reality too terrible to hold. 2 people fell in love without knowing they were already family. 2 branches of a tree reaching toward each other in the dark, never suspecting they shared the same roots, the same blood, the same grandfather who'd been dead for years.
Cormac didn't create this. His father did. Decades of secrets and separate lives and lies told so smoothly they became invisible. And now, his son kneels on a bathroom floor, inheriting a catastrophe he never asked for. What would you do? If you knew something that could save someone from a terrible mistake, but telling them would destroy the happiest day of their life, if silence meant safety, and truth meant devastation? If you believe in supporting voices brave enough to share impossible choices, please subscribe. Cormac, you had less than 2 weeks. What went through your mind?
I couldn't move for a long time. Just stayed on that bathroom floor, cold tile against my knees, trying to figure out what the hell I was supposed to do with this information. I could contact Faye directly, but what would I say? Hi, I'm the brother you never knew you had, and also your fiancé is your first cousin. Surprise! She'd think I was insane. A scammer. Some cruel stranger playing a sick joke 2 weeks before her wedding. I could contact Derek, but I had no credibility with him either. No relationship. No proof he'd believe from a man he'd never met. I could go to the authorities, but what crime had been committed? Cousins can legally marry in most states. It wasn't illegal, just wrong, genetically complicated, something they deserved to know before they made vows and planned children, and built a life on a foundation they didn't understand. I could tell the truth at the wedding. That thought kept circling back. Terrible, necessary, the nuclear option that would destroy everything. But at least they'd know. The wedding was in 2 weeks, and I couldn't stop seeing her face in that thumbnail, that hopeful smile. The woman who forgave a father she barely knew. The woman whose mother had died believing her daughter would finally have family. She deserved better than what was coming, but she also deserved the truth. I just had to figure out how to deliver one without destroying the other. The next 3 days dissolved into a haze of insomnia and obsession. I called in sick to work again, told them the stomach bug was hanging on, which wasn't entirely a lie. I still felt nauseous every time I thought about what I'd discovered. Every time I closed my eyes and saw that genetic relationship chart, the lines connecting me to Derek, connecting Derek to Faye through our shared grandfather. I printed out the results on the second day, sat at my kitchen table with the pages spread in front of me, staring at the percentages and the relationship predictions until the numbers started swimming. Coffee rings accumulated on the paper, like evidence of how many hours I'd spent frozen in the same position. The mugs multiplied around my workspace. 5 of them by the 3rd morning, all half empty, all cold, all forgotten the moment I poured them. My apartment reflected my mental state. Dishes piling in the sink, blinds half drawn at angles. The same clothes worn for 3 days straight, because choosing something fresh felt impossible when my entire understanding of family had shattered. At 3 a.m. on the 3rd night, I started researching. Cousin marriages, genetic risks, historical precedent. The laptop screen glowed in the darkness as I scrolled through article after article. Academic papers and news stories and forum discussions that went on for hundreds of comments. Darwin married his first cousin, had 10 children with her. Einstein too. Royal families had been doing it for centuries, building dynasties on shared bloodlines. The genetic risks weren't as dramatic as movies made them seem. First cousin couples faced an elevated risk of disorders in offspring, somewhere between 4 and 7% compared to the baseline 3% for unrelated couples. Higher, yes, but not the catastrophic numbers I'd imagined. Plenty of first cousin couples had perfectly healthy children. Plenty lived full lives without complications. I almost convinced myself, let them marry, let them have their happiness. The statistics were in their favor. Most children would be fine. And even if problems arose years later, they'd deal with them. People dealt with worse every day. What right did I have to play God with their wedding over probability charts? But then I'd look at her face in that thumbnail, that hopeful smile, the hair pinned back carefully, and I'd remember what her dying mother wrote. She forgave you before I could finish explaining. That's who she is, brighter than both of us combined. Ife deserved to make her own informed choice, deserved to know the truth before she stood at an altar and promised forever to a man who shared her grandfather, deserved to decide for herself whether the risks were worth taking, whether the love was strong enough to bear the weight of that knowledge. My father had stolen that choice from Ada or Ah for 30 years. I wasn't going to steal it from her daughter. On day 5, I started driving past her apartment. I didn't plan it, just needed to escape my stale apartment. Windows down, radio off, letting street noise fill the silence. Somehow, I ended up on her block, a building from the 1920s, the kind with ornate details and old radiators that probably clanked all winter. Fire escapes zigzagged down the facade. A small shop occupied the corner with flower buckets lined up on the sidewalk, bright splashes of color against urban gray. I drove past without stopping. Then, I drove past again the next morning, and the afternoon after that. I told myself I was observing, gathering information, trying to understand who she was before deciding what to do. But the truth was uglier. I was circling my own sister's life, watching from a distance, too paralyzed to act. On day 7, I saw her. She emerged from the corner shop carrying sunflowers, bright yellow petals against her dark jacket, stems wrapped in brown paper that crinkled as she walked. She moved with confidence that made my chest ache. Shoulders pulled back, quick, purposeful pace. No hesitation at crosswalks. Just a glance and a step, trusting traffic to yield. It did. She moved like someone who expected the world to cooperate. Like someone who'd never been given reason to doubt that good things were coming. I watched from my parked car across the street. Watched her check her phone and smile at whatever appeared on the screen. Probably Derek. Watched her tuck the sunflowers under one arm and hail a cab with the easy authority of someone who belonged in this city. My sister. I wanted to protect that easy confidence, that smile, that trust, but protecting her meant destroying her wedding. Protecting her meant detonating my father's secrets in front of everyone she loved. At midnight that night, I forced myself to consider the alternative. Say nothing. Let them marry. Let them build a life. Let them have children who might, or might not, inherit complications from bloodlines that crossed before their parents ever met. They could live entire lives without knowing. DNA tests weren't mandatory. Family secrets didn't always surface. Maybe decades from now they'd die peacefully, never learning what I knew. But maybe they wouldn't. Maybe their child would someday get curious, send in a sample, and learn the truth, learn that their parents were first cousins, and that someone had known all along. Someone who could have warned them. She'd learn, I knew. That thought lodged in my skull like a splinter I couldn't extract. The future moment when Yi-Fei would discover her brother had stood silent while she walked down that aisle, proof in his hands, and said nothing. I couldn't live inside that future. On day 8, I found the venue. Public records, wedding announcement sites, easy enough for anyone willing to look. A converted warehouse in the arts district. The kind of venue that charged premium prices for the appearance of authenticity. The wedding was Sunday afternoon. The rehearsal dinner was tomorrow night. 8 days since I'd opened that envelope. And now less than 48 hours to decide. I stared at venue details glowing on my laptop. The calendar in my mind marking off the days like a countdown to detonation. Tomorrow night the wedding party would gather, toasting and rehearsing, and celebrating the future. I needed to see her. Not through windshield glass, not in curated photos. I needed to hear her voice. Watch how she laughed. Understand exactly who I was about to shatter before I shattered her. The rehearsal dinner was tomorrow. I'd go. I'd watch. I'd decide, one way or another. This ended when the wedding did. I arrived at the restaurant an hour early. Upscale place in a neighborhood I couldn't afford. White tablecloth starched stiff. Candles flickering in glass holders on every table. The kind of establishment where waiters memorized your name and bread arrived warm in cloth-lined baskets. The wedding party had reserved the back section, separated from main dining by a decorative partition that did nothing to block sound. I asked for a table in front, close enough to hear, far enough to remain invisible. The waiter brought water without being asked, kept refilling it every time the level dropped below halfway. I pretended to study the menu, holding it at eye level like camouflage, but my attention stayed fixed on the entrance. 20 minutes passed. 30. The water glass filled and emptied 3 times. I wasn't thirsty, just needed something to do with my hands. Then she walked in. Yi-Fei wore a cream-colored dress that moved like water when she turned. Her hair fell past her shoulders now, longer than in the thumbnail photo. Longer than when I'd watched her carry sunflowers from that corner shop. She looked radiant, nervous, happy in a way that made my chest hurt to witness. Derek walked beside her with his hand resting on the small of her back, guiding her through the room. Protective without being possessive. My cousin, her cousin, neither of them knowing. The wedding party filtered in behind them. Bridesmaids in coordinating colors. Groomsmen already loosening ties. Parents, and siblings and friends. People gathered to celebrate a union built on a fault line none of them could see. I ordered wine. Told myself it was for courage. The first glass disappeared faster than I intended. The second followed. The third sat untouched. Condensation pooling on the white tablecloth. Making rings, I traced with my finger while I watched. Yi-Fei laughed at something Derek whispered, and the sound made me grip the edge of the table. I'd heard that laugh before, not from her, but from him, my father. The same rhythm, the same sudden burst that couldn't quite be contained. She didn't know where she'd gotten it, didn't know the gesture came from a man who'd watched her grow up from 300 miles away. The speeches started after appetizers. Derek's mother stood first. She was wearing old jewelry, pieces that looked like they'd been passed through generations. Her fingers kept drifting to touch them as she spoke. The nervous habit of someone with something weighing on her mind. When Derek told me he'd found his person, she said, I didn't believe him at first. He'd been so focused on career. I'd almost given up hoping. She paused. Fingers found the jewelry again. But Yi-Fei, from the moment I met you, I knew. You belong in this family. You always have. I watched her face. Tried to read what lived behind polished words. Did she know? Had she always known about her brother-in-law's secret daughter? Was the nervous touching guilt? Or just nerves? I couldn't tell. Still can't. Yi-Fei stood for her own toast a few minutes later. I spent most of my life not knowing where I came from, she said. The room went quiet. My mother raised me alone. My father was a mystery. Someone who sent money but never stayed. Someone I learned to stop asking about. She looked at Derek, at his mother. At the gathered family. I used to think I'd never have this, A family that showed up, that stayed, that wanted me there out of love, not obligation. Her voice caught slightly. She steadied herself. My mother used to say the best things come when you're not searching. I wish my father, whoever he really was, could have been someone worth knowing. But I don't need him anymore. Your family has welcomed me like I was always supposed to be here. She was always supposed to be here. That was the problem. I left before dessert. Walked out without paying for wine I'd barely touched. Needed air. Needed movement. Needed to be anywhere except that room full of people celebrating what shouldn't happen. I walked 6 blocks in the wrong direction before realizing the night was warm. Spring tipping towards summer. Someone's window stood open above me. Old music floating down to the sidewalk. Something with a slow melody drifting through humid air. The kind of thing my father used to play on Sunday mornings. He should have told her. 30 years of secrets and separate lives. He'd had thousands of chances. Chosen silence every time. I wasn't going to make that choice. I went home. Printed fresh DNA results. Put them in a manila folder. Then I wrote a letter to my dead father. 4 pages of everything I'd never said. Disappointment that he'd lied my entire life. Anger that he'd left me to clean his mess. Grief for the father I thought I knew. I told him I hated him for this. And I told him I was going to fix what he'd broken. The letter burned in my kitchen sink at midnight. I held a match to the corner and watched the pages curl and blacken. Watched the ashes swirl down the drain. Tomorrow, I would tell the truth.
Friends, what you just witnessed wasn't futility. Writing a letter to a dead man. Burning it before the ink dries. That's not madness. That's release. Cormac spent 31 years carrying a version of his father that never existed. The coach, the provider, the man at breakfast, all built on secrets that outlived their keeper. And now, at a kitchen sink at midnight, he's choosing to stop carrying the weight alone. Tomorrow, he walks into a wedding with nothing but truth as a weapon. No allies, no credibility with people whose lives he's about to shatter. Only a folder and conviction that silence would make him complicit in his father's final lie. That takes something most of us never find. Willingness to be the villain in someone else's story. Because being the hero in your own requires it. If you believe in showing up when no one asks you to, please subscribe. We need witnesses for moments like these. The wedding is tomorrow afternoon. Cormac, take us inside that venue.
I bought the suit that morning. Dark gray, conservative cut, the kind of thing you wear to a funeral, or to deliver news that feels like one. The salesman tried to upsell me on a silk tie. I told him I wasn't staying long enough for anyone to notice what I was wearing. The venue was exactly what I'd seen in photos. Converted warehouse in the arts district. My father would have had opinions about the architecture. He always did. Would have pointed out the original beams, noted where they'd reinforced the structure, complained about something being slightly off level that nobody else would notice. I arrived after the guests were seated, slipped in through a side door and found a spot at the very back. The folder pressed against my chest, held there the way you hold something precious, or something dangerous. 200 people filled the wooden chairs. Friends, family, co-workers, a whole community gathered to witness a union that couldn't happen. I spotted Derek's mother in the front row, fingers already drifting toward the old jewelry at her throat. The music started. Strings. Something classical I didn't recognize. The processional that marks the beginning of forever. And then she appeared. Ife stood at the end of the aisle. The light hit her differently now. It didn't look hopeful anymore. It looked exposing. It highlighted the fragility of the moment. The terrifying precipice she was walking toward. I counted the steps. 20. 15. Derek stood at the front. The uncle I never knew had given him that jawline. The family blood I'd just discovered ran through his veins. Same as mine. 10 steps. I could still leave. I could turn around and vanish. 5 steps. She laughed. That gesture again. The hand covering the mouth. The echo of the dead man who caused all this. I moved. 1 foot forward. Heavy. Like walking through deep water. Stop. The word came out quieter than I intended. Barely more than a breath. But the acoustics of that warehouse carried it. bounced it off brick and copper, delivered it to every corner of the room. Ife froze, one foot still raised for the next step, bouquet clutched at waist, the small white flowers trembling in her hair. Everyone turned, 200 strangers staring at the man in the dark gray suit. The man with the folder, the man who'd just shattered the most important moment of her life with a single word. Derek's mother stood halfway. A child started crying somewhere in the middle rows. "Who are you?" Derek's voice cut through. Sharp, protective. I walked forward. Every step felt like a betrayal. I stopped 5 feet from them, close enough to see Ife's hands shaking around her bouquet. "My name is Cormac. Gerald was my father." Her breath caught. "He was also your father, Ife. You're my half-sister." Silence. The kind of silence that sucks the air out of a room. That presses against eardrums. I turned to Derek. "And Gerald was your uncle. He was your father's estranged brother." I opened the folder, held out the papers with hands that wouldn't stop trembling. "Your parents were siblings, your first cousins. No one took them." Ife stared at me, not at the papers, at me. "How long have you known?" Not angry, tired, resigned. The voice of someone who'd spent her whole life waiting for her father's secrets to finally catch up. 9 days. She nodded slowly. 9 days. Then she dropped her bouquet. Flowers hit polished concrete. The small white blooms scattered across the floor. Looking like debris from a crash, she turned away from the altar. Just walked. Not running. Not screaming. Walking with a measured pace. Shoulders back. Holding herself together through sheer will. Away from everyone.
Cormac, 9 days. That was her question. Not how dare you. Not what gives you the right. She asked how long you'd carried this alone. There's something in that question. Something that sounds like anger, but might be something else entirely. She wanted to know if telling her had cost you anything. It did. We both know it did. She didn't walk toward Derek. Didn't walk toward the exit. Didn't walk toward you. Just away. But she didn't run. Running is escape. Walking is processing. Your sister is processing. Sometimes the messenger survives. Sometimes truth only destroys what needed breaking. Sometimes 2 people discover their family in the worst possible way, and still find their way to each other eventually. You did what your father couldn't. What he should have done 30 years ago. What he was finally ready to do 3 months before his stroke. You finished his unfinished business. If this story changed how you see your own family secrets, please subscribe. Every voice shared here matters. The hearth remains lit. We'll gather again soon.
She walked away. Not toward me. Not toward Derek. Not toward the parents or the guests, or the glowing exit signs at the edges of the room. Just away. But she didn't run. And she didn't scream. She walked like someone who'd expected this moment her whole life. Like someone who finally understood why her father never stayed. Why the money came without the man. Why 30 years of letters couldn't replace presence. My sister. I stood at the altar with papers still trembling in my hand. Derek hadn't moved. His mother was crying. The officiant stood frozen. And Ife kept walking. She reached the far end of the venue. Paused at the door. Her shoulders rose and fell with one deep breath. She didn't look back. The door opened. Afternoon light flooded in. Bright and warm and utterly indifferent to what had shattered inside these walls. She stepped through. Gone. I looked down at the folder in my hands. The DNA results. The proof. No one had taken them. The truth was out now. Scattered across the room like the flower petals on the floor. Impossible to gather back up. Impossible to unsay. What happened next? That wasn't my story to tell. It was hers.